Hello and welcome to Thav TV. I am your host Natasha Brown and this is Thav Exclusive. On today's episode, I will be speaking with an interesting individual. I like to call her eccentric because she actually is. She's a lecturer in the Department of Theatre and Film Studies in the University of Port Harcourt, an absolutely prestigious university, I might say. And also she has a master's degree in film studies and currently pursuing her PhD in feminist dramatic criticism. Now, I know that piques your interest. So, to gain more insight into who she is, what she's about, and all the shebang, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. All right. Welcome, Mrs. Margaret Ukwu. Welcome so much. This has been a long time coming.
Yes, it really has been a very, very long time. I'm very pleased to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that you are pretty much busy and it took a lot for you to get here. And for that, I'm so grateful. Now, let's just get right into this interview because I can't wait to get into this whole talk. You're such an interesting person, like I said earlier. So now, you are into film studies, you are into theater, you are into the whole works. First of all, I would like you to give us a little bit into your background because I know there's something interesting there. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but let's get into your background.
Yeah, well, you said something about film and drama and all that. I actually have a bachelor's degree in theatre. I did a documentary on prostitution back then. And then I have a master's degree in feminist film criticism. And then I am doing a PhD in dramatic criticism. Before then, actually, I was rather interested in performance, in theatre and mass communication. But my parents didn't really want me to do that. And I had to take a rather circuitous journey to get back into doing what I really wanted to do.
Right. So, I'm still going to just circle back a little because I remember a pretty much interesting story, how you started off with English studies and then 3 years down the line, you're like, okay, no, I think I'm done. I'm going back home. So let's hear more about that.
Yeah, that's why I said I took a rather circuitous journey. I didn't want to, we're having an interview conversation. So it was a rather roundabout journey. But what actually happened was that when we got back from the UK, my father insisted that we must stay in Nigeria and get our first degree so that we would actually be familiar with Nigeria, with Africa, and get rid of all the stereotypes that we had imbibed from when we were small. So when I took JAM, I wanted to do mass communication of theatre arts. My father said, over my dead body will any child of mine cavort naked on stage, either it's law or English and literary studies. So I picked the lesser evil, English and literary studies. Didn't like it one bit, but I was getting by. When I got to year 3, second semester, I'd even been given a project topic. But then I just wasn't happy. Then I had a roommate, Anne Emwezo. I'll always thank God for her. She said, look, Margaret, if you don't really like this thing, go home and tell your parents. I said, but they'll kill me. At that point in time, how old was I? I said, no, but if you don't like it, go back. So I left my books, 67 copies of African Writers series, every other thing, and I just walked back home with a little bag and I said to my dad, I'm not doing this anymore. He said, what do you mean by you're not doing this? You just have 6 months to get your degree. I said, but I don't like it. He didn't speak to me for 2 years. Just my mother. Then eventually I had to go back and bring a transcript to show them I had actually been taking my exams. And then they even told me that, look, if you come back, you'll get your degree in 6 months. My dad said, okay, go back and get your degree. I said, no, I'm not going back. I didn't want to go back. Then I started from certificate because I couldn't get a transfer into the University of Port Harcourt. So I started from the certificate program, did directing because I also wanted to be sure that I actually had what it took to do it into theatre arts. I got a distinction in directing and continued from there.
Interesting. And it's, for me, it's really interesting because you said you were at the age of 19, 20, thereabout when this happened. So I'm imagining as a young adult, I mean, your friends had already graduated when you were about to start again. So how were you able to manage that whole mental space during that period?
Well, first of all, I'd have to give credit to my mom. She said, well, at least I know that you didn't fail out of school. You've got the transcript. As I said, my father didn't speak to me for 2 years.
2 years.
And then he washed his hands. He said, well, he wasn't paid because I was supposed to have graduated. So my mother took over paying my school fees.
Interesting.
You know, she took over paying my school fees, and she kept encouraging me, saying, "Look, you have what it takes." Well, as for my friends, of course, you know how Nigeria is now. Ah, you're not a graduate, you're going back certificate, you're not good enough. So they went to stop talking to me, and of course I said, well, if you didn't want to talk to me, fine. So we were mutually distant. I made a new set of friends, but I knew what I wanted to do. And by the time I got to this, the certificate, 6 months to the end of it, my father died. No, in fact, he died 2 weeks to the end, my final production. But before then, he said to my mother that, look at how happy Margaret is. Maybe I should have let her do this theatre arts when she wanted to. So I had the satisfaction of at least my father appreciating what had ended up.
He did finally come to embrace it, and that would have been absolutely a beautiful thing for you. And it brings me to even emphasize the role of a supportive parent. A parent that sees the light in you from the get-go and says, I'm going to stand by you and watch you become all that you can be, because I know that this is something that you're interested in. There are a lot of parents who wouldn't do that. I mean, there are a lot of parents who would literally be like your dad and say, you know what, we're done. Find your way. Since, you know, so it's, I'm sure that till tomorrow you give your mom kudos for that.
I do, because she was always there. And it's very, very important for parents sometimes to listen to their children. Don't force your own wishes onto your child. You know, there are loads of cases of children who have studied courses because their parents wanted them to do that. And as soon as they throw them away and go and do something else. So you have to listen to them. You know,
or they even likely live in perpetual dissatisfaction with their lives because they had to please their parents at some point in time, and then later on in life they start backpedaling. You know, so that's definitely a key thing. Now let's get right into film, theater, and all of that. How did you come into that? What's part of that passion? Has it always been there from childhood?
Well, I come from a family of performers. My grandmothers used to be in all the choral renditions and all that. My mother used to be in that as well, also TV programs. And from childhood, I've been part of Christmas pageants, choirs, TV shows, debates. So I'd always liked that. That's why I wanted to do mass communication or theatre. And apart from that, I also wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes. So I've always been interested in knowing, how does this happen? A bit like when you have children, when they see TVs and they want to open the back of TVs, how are those people talking? So it's always been a passion for me. And fortunately, my career path has taken me that way.
And that it's and I see how passionate you are about what you do, and I see how you even talk about your students, you know, tutoring them and making everything to be live. You interact with them. It's a debate. It's a conversation. I want to hear your thoughts originally, which, you know, generically, traditionally is not a Nigerian thing. Our lecturers, they just want to download something to you and give me back what I've given to you. But now you are coming with a different concept.
Yeah, because first of all, when I was a student, there were some lecturers I admired greatly because they had that down-to-earth approach. Later, Matu Grade, Dr. Ukwu. Then I also admired some for their intellectual prowess, Professor Ukwu, for Professor Shaka, who led me into something that we'll talk about later. And then when I was a student, everyone was talking about, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, I'm going to make money. Then I said, I want to be a lecturer. They laughed at me. And then I said, because I want to be the sort of lecturer that I wished I had when I was a student. So anytime I'm lecturing, what I do is that I remember, what would I have liked to have experienced when I was a student? And that's what I bring to my class.
I love that. And I know that that is definitely paving ways for them, because it enables them to come into their original sense of self when they start to interpret things through their lenses. And even when you get to correct them, now they originally own the idea. Exactly. So when they're exerting whatever, it comes out of an authentic form of self. So it's definitely an impressive thing they do. And I hope that Nigerian lecturers get to, you know, imbibe that even more. So now let's get really into film now. The creative industry, Nollywood, Nigeria here. I think right now we are at number 2, if not, I think we're before Bollywood. So there's Hollywood, there's Nollywood. We're doing massively well, but there always is that little bias somewhere when it comes to the audience, where we say that the Nollywood of 20 years ago and the Nollywood now there's a difference. There's something that is not connecting. So we're talking about 20 years ago, thereabout, you had like, the rattlesnakes, you had the living in bondage, you had all of those. And those plots, they had some authenticity, it just drew you in. And I remember then as a child that, we would all sit in the living room and we're watching, and everybody is just looking into it and just seeing different angles. And then at the end of the day, most times at night, you have the older ones who want to talk about that, and then people are giving their feedback on different aspects. So the content was so rich, right? But now people there's a thought that we have a watered down Nollywood version. We have the good technical crew. Our visuals are on point, but the content itself is watered down. What do you have to say about that?
Well, that's the truth of the matter. The old Nollywood told our own stories in a way we could relate to them. People would watch those films and say, "Oh, this happened in my village. This woman is like this one here." You could relate to them. You could relate to the situation. The technical quality wasn't there. First of all, they were using VHS. They were using regular studio cameras, or what we would use for camcorders and things like that. Now, today, we have the technical quality, as you said, the visuals, but the stories are not our stories. Their stories are watered down versions of what they think the rest of the world would like to see. They're imitations of what you have in Hollywood. You have some of them speaking accents that I like to call Amaribu or Yoruba English. They're speaking, you're speaking the English or Americanese in a strange manner because you want to fit in.
Yeah.
And then that sort of robs us of our authenticity. The other time we were talking, and I reminded everyone that when Vivica Fox came for an AMA award, she said that Nollywood films are telling our stories in our own way. I know that there was a time when they came from Hollywood, surprised at how we were shooting those films, and offered to set up a film village. But Nigerians said no, because they would now come and try to adulterate or dilute what we were doing. Now we're seeing the dilution because we want to meet global standards, but then we're not telling our stories.
No, but would you not? Okay, looking at it from the aspect of being globally appealing and being marketable to the global market space, so to speak, isn't that what is informing the way that we tweak our stories? So there's some form of Westernese in it, and then you can still see some features of Africanness in it and all.
Yeah, it is. But then again, as I would say, if you watch telenovela or you watch the Bollywood films that are on Z World, you see that they're very, very popular. The telenovelas, they use this, transcription at the bottom, subtitles. And people get a taste of that Latina vibrancy and all that. So, yes, we're trying to fit in the technical quality, knowing the filmic language, but then at the expense of our own stories. I mean, as I said, you want to watch Viola Davis. I don't want to watch Viola Davis light.
Oh, Viola Davis, Broma.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting angle to come from, because drawing it from a story you told about back when you were in school, and then a particular teacher of yours said to you, tell your stories authentically, use your voice, and telling our stories authentically as Africans that we are. What does that actually mean? Is it the Asaba kind of movies? Is it the one that will show hots and us tied in wrappers? What really is our original or authentic African story?
That is one of the greatest questions I've ever heard. Because what is our authentic African story? There are hundreds or if not thousands of tribes, ethnic nationalities in Africa. So we do not have one story. Even in Nigeria, we have hundreds of ethnic nationalities. We do not have one story. What they shoot in Asaba is not even the Nigerian or Igbo culture, because you see them with crowns on their heads, or you see something that looks like a Zulu hut. You see them moving around with spears and things like that.
And then marks on their bodies and all that.
And all those things. So it's a mishmash of different things. Sometimes I watch some of them when they have people, and I wonder whether I'm watching Dowager Abbey in dress or costume, because they're trying to appropriate too many things. And the beauty of Africa, of Nigeria, is that we have so many different ethnic nationalities. The important thing is that whatever story you're telling, be authentic and also make it believable. We have, even when we're talking about our authentic African or Nigerian stories, we have folk culture and we have popular culture. We have to make a difference, a distinction between the two. Because if you bring out something and you say it's epic, it's traditional, and somebody will say, oh, but that's not what it's like in my place. And anyway, I can't relate to it. I often tell people that, like we were talking the other time, but okay, what do we call African culture? You've got braids on your head, but it's with attachment. You're wearing African print, but it's not that way. I'm wearing jeans, I've got a braid, but it's a braided wig. Under my wig, I was my hair plait in thread. We've got makeup on. Yes, makeup is part of us, but we're not using uli or camel
or tiro.
We're using lipstick and eyeshadow and mascara and things like that. But does that make us less authentically African? These are the questions we have to ask, because that also is what is affecting what we're turning out. What is authentically African or Nigerian?
Definitely. And so even based off of what you've said, being African and telling our African stories is beyond our skin color, is beyond our Afro hair, is beyond whatever they call Afrocentricity or whatnot. There is more to us than what has been told us. So that would bring me to my question of the reason we are having certain uninformed contents out there masquerading as authentic stories. Wouldn't it be as a result of having a sketchy history knowledge?
Of course.
So, but I know you can't wait to get into that question, but we'll just hold on. Please do stay tuned, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Okay, so before we went on a short break, we were about to talk on our history, right? So in order to originally tell our stories the way they ought to be told, we need a rich knowledge of our background history. So what's your take on the fact that we put out some half-baked content, so to speak? Would it be as a result of sketchy knowledge of our history? Or what would you say informs that?
Part of the, first of all, is that if you're talking about those that deal with, shall I say, pre-colonial eras, it's definitely a lack of knowledge of our history. That's what's the fact of it. So they're just drawing inspiration from different parts of the world and cultures, and we really need to study our history in all its beauty and all its nastiness. We can't romanticize it. But then again, when it comes to other aspects of it too, I would like to use the word history in the terms of, as you said, telling a story. My story, your story, her story, his story. And we are not telling our stories. We're trying to conform to other people's stories or impressions of ourselves. And that is dangerous. We have seen how we talk about appropriation or misappropriation of
cultures.
That brings from a lack of understanding of another person's story. If you don't understand someone's story, for instance, about skin color and all that, you'll assume that everybody who's African has Afro hair, is dark-skinned and has a flat nose. Not knowing that even within the geographical entity Nigeria, we have different people of different colors, even within one ethnic nationality, because we have had cross-cultural relationships that have gone on for thousands of years. If they do a DNA ancestry test of yours, you'll find out that you trace so many different ethnic nationalities in there. So these misconceptions of our own story, people assume that the only transcultural relationship was when they were transported to the Americas. It's inaccurate. We've had it for thousands of years.
And why I even I wanted to even go into cultural appropriation, misappropriation, and all of that. It's because I remember you said your mom had an experience where she met with a white girl that said, "Oh, you're Nigerian. I actually have a Nigerian name, Yemisi," and she's like, "Okay," because we see all of that, and then we are like almost getting riled up. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And then we see some artists. I mean, Beyonce has been totally called out. Oh, you are. Right, trying to be all Africanese and all that, trying to get into our market and making it look like you're one of us and all that. But there are actually positive sides to that. And then, like you rightly said, at the end of the day, we are all, culture is not static, like you would always say. It evolves, and most of the time it's intertwined.
It is.
So I'm you, you're me. So now I'm, like you said, on an attachment, it doesn't make me any less African.
It doesn't at all. It doesn't. When even people talk about misappropriation and appropriation, these are just buzzwords. Of course, the simple thing you do is if somebody doesn't understand something, you explain to them what it's about. But that even if somebody, as you say, misappropriates your culture, it's a sign that the person in his own way is trying to understand and appreciate your culture. So you have to look at things so it's your duty to come and educate the person on it. I remember something I didn't tell you that I'm not used to. I'm a jeans and t-shirt person. So there was a day when I was a student, they said, okay, we had to wear traditional attire for a crowd scene. My mother gave me some wrappers. I looked at it, I said, okay, I took one, tied this way, tied the other one. The lecturer looking at me, Columbus wrist, and started laughing. He said, that one that you're tying it upside down. Right. This one is supposed to be the right way, this way, and all that. As far as I was concerned, I was tying two wrappers, but he pointed out to me that the top one, which has the join, I tied the join down instead of up. Right. So he pointed it, and it's the same thing with anything about culture. It's a duty and a pleasure for somebody to try it out, and then for you to correct the person. It means the person wants to know more.
Right, totally. So it even gives us more room to even tell our stories here the more, so that these people actually know how to work with it. Because at the end of the day, your culture is not an island. It's not for you alone. Other people see it and they appreciate it, and they actually want to identify with it. So there's all of that angle. And then now it brings me to this curious part of your expertise, so to speak. You are currently pursuing your PhD program, and then it's in feminist dramatic criticism. Okay, now what's that all about? What's that all about?
Well, one of the things in academics is the higher you go, the more high flown the language. So you start hearing all these words, and everybody starts switching off. But quite simply, feminism has to do with addressing areas of social injustice, especially targeted against women. And then you have different brands of it, ranging from the most virulent to those that are less virulent. And because of the virulent brands, most people equate feminism with a battle for supremacy. But then I always tell people that misandry is not the same thing as feminism, just as misogyny is not the same thing as masculinism, and that you cannot replace one form of oppression with another. Right. But basically, I align myself with those who believe in complementarity, which is that men and women can work together to improve society and improve areas of injustice. I got into feminism as an undergraduate by my BA supervisor, Professor Shaka. I said, okay, Margaret, we're going to do a documentary, a feminist documentary. I said, I don't agree with it. So I read up on it, and then I found an area, did my documentary on prostitution in Port Harcourt. Very interesting experience. Very, very, you can imagine, filming that and people trying to break your camera. And then I did a master's in feminist film criticism, and then started a PhD in film, but on how films are constructed, narrativity. But I decided to switch to dramatic criticism because everything is intertwined. And especially when you're dealing with gender issues, all of those things add up to give you a greater idea of what's going on in society. So that's
and I remember that you were talking about how films also give stereotypes to the feminine gender. So they put us in various structures and all of that, and then we have to most of the time walk around such stereotypes, even unconsciously.
Because film, all forms of culture, all things like film and all that are aspects of culture, and they sort of reinforce whatever the culture says. Stereotypes are like shorthand, shorthand. They sort of tell you, okay, if someone says I'm an African, there's a stereotype that you expect to fit in, and like women. And then if you talk of feminine stereotypes, they're not all bad. You have good and bad ones. Like the good woman is submissive, kind, tolerant, caring, spiritual, prayerful, a good mother,
quiet, not too loud, not loud at all.
Not loud at all. A bad woman, on the other hand, is aggressive, bossy, domineering, wears a lot of makeup,
strong personality, all of that.
And all that. And then, but at the same time, those qualities that they say are good don't work when you're in the kind of world we live in today, because a woman is not just a homemaker or a wife, she's also a businesswoman, she's a professional, she's a banker. And the quality she needs to work in her profession are those qualities that they say are bad. I mean, like if you're a good woman and then somebody owes you money, it's taking a bank loan, you're the bank manager. Okay, my dear, don't worry, we'll pray over it. Don't worry, when you have time, you come back and all that. They'll sack you in a second. But then to function as a bank manager, you have to be aggressive, you have to be decisive, you have to be capable of taking initiative. Those qualities, ironically, are reserved for the man. But then, as I said before, that men too are very, very wise. When they want to take unpleasant decisions, they'll say, I'm going to ask my wife. Right. And then when that unpleasant decision has to be taken to someone, say, my wife said. And then the poor wife is the one who bears the brunt of the evil and everything.
Right.
But then that's how stereotypes work on both sides. So we look at that. And there's also the stereotype in the industry as well. A woman is good if she's in front of the camera, whether she's advertising something or she's an actress. But you don't have so many women behind the camera as producers, directors, script writers, and things like that. So we are looking at those areas as well.
So that brings us to the point of, because I mean, feminism, at the end of the day, there's still a correlation to gender equality, gender biases, and all of that. What's your take on that? Because at the end of the day, yes, we have especially in film, we have a ratio of a certain percentage of women, fewer behind the cameras and more in front of the cameras, because it seems like, okay, we are poised to be in front of the camera. So when you see females behind the scene, most of the time there's a lot of brush with their male counterparts here and there. You know,
first of all, it's like when I had a personal experience before I graduated, someone asked me, said, oh, we'd really like you in the industry and all that. I said, I'd like to go behind the scenes to know how it works. I'd like to be a director. He said, oh, that's difficult. If you wanted to be an actress, that's easy. I said, no, I'm not interested. And that's played out now. You talked about the brashness. Have you gone to an engineering faculty in Nigeria? The engineering faculty is like a boys' club. Very few women are in there. I met a young engineering student. She's in year 2. And she said that in her class, there are just 3 females.
Interesting.
And the lecturer refused to acknowledge their femaleness, calls all of them guys. And they all have to put on that brash attitude. Sometimes the fellows start cracking sort of jokes and sort of looking at them to see whether they'll flinch. So they'll measure up. And it's the same thing in the film industry. Most of the women who are like cameramen, directors and the rest, they have to put on that attitude to fit in, to belong. Because nobody's going to, if you don't behave like that, they say, oh, you can't be in here and all that. So that's why some people too don't want women to go behind the camera. But they have to, because that's where the real power in the industry is, behind the camera. As a producer, as a director, as an editor, as a cinematographer, that's the power in the industry. Being in front of the camera is one thing.
And then, so definitely that's a problem. That is a problem. And most of the time, when we see women come out and they clamor for equality and all of that, and then we see a number of men come up to say, oh, these ones are witch feminists, so to speak, and all of that. And it seems like they want to paint feminists as ugly, aggressive, and, pained and lonely. We know that there is that extreme part. But we also identify that there is a bias in sectors, right? I know that I've had this conversation with my male counterparts from time to time, and they say that, it's an illusion, it's a fluke. If you're good for the job, go get the job. But just because you're good for the job doesn't get you the job. There are already biases in the minds of men. A lot of these people already think, okay, women, because of our emotional aspects or our hormonal changes here and there, we are not poised to take top positions. So rather, okay, let the man do that. Biologically, that's quite understandable, because I mean, we talked about biological advantages and all of that between our male counterparts and the female counterparts, but then, like you rightly said, complementing each other, where we get to realize that just because I'm in a body doesn't necessarily mean that I cannot do the job. If I can do the job, then I should get the job done. You know, so there's all of these aspects that we are to look at, and which is a progressive conversation we've been having recently and all of that. But I would like to ask, you know, rounding up this whole conversation, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? How do we begin to manage our individual genders? How do we begin to embrace actually complementing each other and still putting who's good for the job to be at the job?
Well, the first thing is that there was this move. First of all, you used to hear equity before equality. Because people used to talk about equality, denying that there were differences. But then they started talking about equity. I saw a picture that I liked. Equality is like you put everyone on
the same level.
And equity is that you bring somebody up to be on that level. So when Mrs. Jonathan came up with this idea of 30% being reserved for women, that was an idea of equity. When we talk of educationally disadvantaged, those things are equity, bringing people up to that point. So we have to recognize where there are imbalances and try to bring them up. And then when they talk about being good for the job, well, I would like to, not by being political, but you notice that whenever a woman commits an infraction in politics, they jump on it, like the Betty Edu scandal.
I said the same thing. I mentioned the same thing.
Come up and jump on it. But when
she's quickly fired, quickly suspended.
Suspended. But they say, we just gave women a little chance. Look at what they've done. How many? Wasn't up to ₦1 billion naira. Now, when somebody else gets to 23 billion, we don't hear anything about it. So it's like you open the door for a crack and just pray that a woman will fail.
Right.
But then
to make it seem that I told you.
But then at the same time, you know, we just have to accept that, you know, there are areas of inequality. And we can't wish them away. So that's just what we have to recognize, but we all have to work together. Even in the film industry, we have to work together to improve everything that's to go on in the industry, in our lives, and in the larger society.
All right, thank you so much. But before we round up, finally, where do you see the creative industry, the Nigerian creative industry, in the next 10 years?
The Nigerian...
Do you see us overtaking Hollywood? Hello?
Well, I definitely see us taking over the creative industry as a whole. We've done it in music, we're going to do it in film, and we're going to do it in the digital media.
Right.
Because all of them work together. That's where we'll be in 10 years from now. The content creators will become the gurus. Like what we're doing here today, we expect it in 10 years' time to turn into a real creative hub. If it doesn't, then I'll hold you responsible. Tasha and Thav TV.
Okay, this was a call out. It was a call out I was not expecting, but thank you so much, Madam Margaret. I mean, this was absolutely enlightening, insightful, and you are, like I would always say, you're rich, full of knowledge, and you are someone that I always love to have a conversation with, and I hope that you will come through as a guest again.
Anytime.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to your greater works out there.
Thank you very much.
All right, this is Staff TV. Remember to keep watching, staying tuned, subscribe if you haven't, share, comment, and let us know what you think. I remain your host, Natasha Brown, and bye for now.